Labbing in fighting games is a monumentally difficult task. And in a game like Tekken specifically, it really doesn't help that there are certain characters with way too many stances, moves, and mix-ups to make it difficult to lab. In Tekken, characters like this are typically referred to as lab characters. The reason they're referred to as lab characters is because they are known as matchups where you can't just play them enough to know how to fight them. You have to go into practice mode and study their gimmicks to know how to fight them. And while trying to learn these terrifying matchups is a very difficult task, there are a couple golden rules you can use in these type of matchups that will simplify the process a lot more. So today, here are 3 tips for dealing with lab characters. Now, before we begin, I do want to mention that the term lab character doesn't actually relate to a specific character. Everyone kind of has their own definition of lab character, but like I said before, it generally refers to the characters that are very gimmicky with a ton of stances. In particular, characters like Ganryu, Yoshimitsu, Ling, and Horeng, just to name a few. Leroy, for example, would not be considered a lab character. He only has one stance and is more about just general pressure than gimmicky attacks. Same with Katarina. Again, she may be very aggressive, but she isn't a labby gimmicky character. The first golden rule I want to give you is be wary of highs and plus frames. What I'm referring to is be careful of using highs and taking advantage of your plus frames. These characters are really good at evasion more often than not and can launch you for over half your health just by trying to jab and get your pressure going. Now yes, I know some of your very best moves are most likely highs, but just remember these characters are literally designed to go under a good majority of your moves and do it while attacking you at the same time. In short, you're welcome to use your highs and plus frames, just be very sparing when you do it, just to make sure you're not getting blown up for something you shouldn't have been blown up for. In general, you want to be using moves that have low hitting hitboxes. Most lows should do the trick, and whatever low hitting mid you have will usually be one of your other best options. Forward with Kazuya or back 2 are good options. And another good example is Brian's down back 2. The next tip I want to talk about is neutral. To explain this, we need to ask the question, what is the game plan goal of these lab characters? If you ask me, there's 2 answers to this question. The first one is to mix up the opponent as much as humanly possible. The second, however, which is something a lot of people forget about, is trying to bait the opponent into attacking them. Many people look at Horeng as the golden boy of lab characters, as he is one of the most common lab characters you fight and is extremely aggressive, as that is his game plan by design. Horeng, however, while he is a lab character, does not represent the vast majority of lab characters. A better representer of lab characters would be Ling Xiaoyu, who again mixes you up whenever possible and tries to bait you into attacking with her backwards parries and Art of Phoenix, just to name a few things. But notice how her style of gameplay is very similar to Lei Wulong, Eddie Gordo, Yoshimitsu, and even Ganryu. You can even throw Zafina, one of the best characters of the entire game, in the same category. So, how do we counter this? This might sound crazy, but let them chase you. Because what a lot of people forget is in order for these characters to actually get their mix up, they more often than not have to take a big risk, especially in the neutral, more often than you think. And because these characters are designed around gimmicks and weird tricks, their neutral tools and basic fundamental tools are often a lot weaker than a vast majority of the cast, as again, their strongest moves are locked behind stances and tricky setups, rather than just having strong basic tools. Again, there definitely is time to pressure these characters. For example, Horang is a character you actually want to be pressuring, as one of his only really good keep out tools is back 3, which is minus 15, making it launch punishable by a good majority of characters. But tying into my last point, you just need to be very careful when it comes to trying to pressure characters like this, as again, they want you to attack them. They do not want to chase you. And keep in mind, a lot of lower level players who play lab characters are very, very used to people chasing after them. So if you throw them out of their comfort zone by just staying away and having a small life lead, they'll fall apart more often than you think. But if there's one rule that's more important than anything else, it would be option select. A good example is Lay's forward forward 3. He can just do forward forward 3, go backwards, or he can extend it with pressing 4, which will be a counter hit knockdown. If you are to dick jab here, all options will be covered and this will be a punish to this move. I know that one was kind of depressing considering you want to get way more damage, so a better example would be Yoshimitsu in his helicopter stance. If you block his transition into helicopter, you can float him out of his helicopter stance, as he is 2- to do any attacks that counter hit you, and because he's in a stance, he cannot block, allowing you to float him. Another annoying classic example is Eddie's hand stance. You know, the spinning helicopter move. Remember that all options he does here puts him at a minus enough frames where if you do a fast, low hitting attack, you'll option select him out of a good majority of his attacks, and maybe be able to even float him. One thing you do have to do is figure out what your character's best move is in this situation. I will say for this one in particular, you want a very low hitting fast move. So I play Paul, and if I see helicopter stance, I'll either do 3-2 and the back sway 4 as I'll get a float, or down one of them trying to play it safe. But what is the most important thing going on here that you see throughout all of the examples I just gave you? It isn't necessarily about just doing damage or getting plus frames. The most important thing that's going on throughout all of these situations is that you are taking the lab character out of their stance. One of your primary objectives when fighting these characters is to make sure they are in a stance as little as possible. A good example of this is Lay. Lay has way too many stances, but if you do a fast mid or low, you will get him out of the stance, whether he blocks it or not. While you might not get any damage, as I mentioned before, you are taking him out of his stance, and all of Lay's strongest moves are locked behind stances. So if you are able to keep these characters out of their stances, their moveset will be significantly limited, and their options to pressure you. If you have any more tech or information you would like to put in the comments, please do so. I feel like stuff like this does not get talked about enough, or only high to pro level players know about it, which is just not acceptable in a game with so many characters and moves, and with Tekken 8 coming out with a bunch of crazy mechanics. It's good to know important stuff like this to help you progress significantly and not get rolled over for no reason. Again, with characters like this, you still have to lab on your own, but if you apply the rules I mentioned, it will simplify the process significantly. Take care and see you soon.